I never thought betrayal could have a face so familiar, or that promises could shatter as quickly as glass when money became scarce. My name is Luke Miller, and I'm 40 years old. Each morning I wake in a house I built with my own hands, running a construction company that employs over 70 people. Jenny Miller, my ex-wife of 7 years, walked out when our refrigerator was empty and my dreams seemed worthless. "I can't starve for dreams," she said, packing her designer purse I'd bought in better times. My friend Fernie warned me she wouldn't last, but I refused to believe loyalty had a price tag. The betrayal stripped everything: our apartment, my confidence, even my wedding band, which I pawned to make payroll. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me beg. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. The bills spread across our kitchen table like a losing hand of cards: electric, water, rent, and the business loan I'd taken out 8 months ago. Each one stamped with red warnings that made my stomach knot. I pushed the half-eaten plate of spaghetti away, appetite gone. We couldn't afford meat that week. Again. It was a cold Tuesday evening in Bakersfield, the kind where the wind finds every crack in the walls of our run-down duplex. Jenny stood by the sink, arms crossed tight over her chest, staring at the flickering bulb above like it personally offended her. The light buzzed, dimmed, then brightened again. A cycle it had repeated for days now. "That damn light," she muttered, breaking the silence that had stretched between us for nearly 20 minutes. "And the heater barely works. I had to wear a sweater to bed last night, Luke." I rubbed my temples, trying to massage away the headache that had become my constant companion. "I know, I'll fix it tomorrow." "Like you fixed the bathroom sink?" Her voice had that edge to it, sharp, ready to cut. "It's been dripping for 3 weeks. I've been working, Jenny, trying to land jobs." I gestured at the stack of estimates I'd written up that week. "People are interested. They're just hesitating to commit." She laughed. Not the warm sound I fell in love with, but something bitter and hollow. "Hesitating. That's a nice way of saying no one's hiring you." "They will." I stood up, needing to move, to do something with the frustration building in my chest. "The economy's tough right now, but people always need repairs. Ace Restore is going to take off. I just need a little more time." Jenny's eyes narrowed. "Time? We've been living on just a little more time for almost 2 years, Luke." She pointed to the fridge, its empty shelves a constant reminder of how bad things had gotten. "I worked doubles at the salon all week just to buy groceries. My feet are killing me, and for what? So you can chase some fantasy while we drown in debt?" "It's not a fantasy." My voice came out harder than I intended. "It's a business. My business. Our future." "Our future?" She stepped closer and I could smell that perfume. The expensive one her boss gave her for Christmas. The one I couldn't afford. "What future? We can barely afford the present." I remember how the kitchen light cast harsh shadows across her face, making her look older, harder. I was so damn tired. Tired of struggling, tired of explaining, tired of watching her disappointment grow day by day. "Jenny, please." I reached for her hand. "I just need you to believe in me. In us." She pulled away like my touch burned. "I did believe in you. For 7 years. And where did it get me? A broken heater and ramen noodles 4 nights a week. If you'd just be patient." "Patient?" She cut me off, voice rising. "I can't live like this anymore, Luke. I won't." That's when I noticed it. The suitcase by the door. Not the overnight bag she took to her sister's when we fought. The large one, the one we'd bought for our honeymoon to Catalina Island when money wasn't so tight. It was already packed, zipped up neat and ready to go. My blood went cold. "How long have you been planning this?" She grabbed her purse from the counter, avoiding my eyes. "Long enough." I followed her to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. "There's someone else, isn't there?" Jenny paused, hand on the doorknob. For a moment I thought she might deny it, might give me something to hold on to. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said quietly, not turning around. And just like that, she was gone. The door closed with a hollow echo that seemed to bounce around our small duplex, amplifying the sudden emptiness. I stood there, staring at the closed door, waiting for her to come back, to say she'd made a mistake, to give us another chance. Minutes stretched into an hour. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, marking the end of one life and the beginning of another. I turned back to our kitchen, my kitchen now, and looked at the empty chair across from me, the space where she should have been. "I won't beg," I whispered to the silence. "Not for you. Not for anyone." I woke to sunlight streaming through the thin curtains and the unfamiliar sound of silence. No coffee brewing, no shower running, just emptiness pressing down like a physical weight. Jenny's side of the bed hadn't been slept in. For a moment, I let myself pretend she'd crashed on the couch after our fight, that I'd find her there with that look she gets when she's ready to make up. But the living room was empty, just as I knew it would be. I shuffled to the closet, sliding open the door even though I already knew what I'd see. Her side was empty, hangers askew like broken fingers. A few lonely wire ones dangling where her work clothes used to be. She must have been clearing things out for weeks, a little at a time, so I wouldn't notice. I ran my hand along the vacant rack, feeling something crack inside my chest. In the bathroom, her toothbrush was gone. So were the expensive creams and lotions that used to crowd the counter. Even her coffee mug, the one with the chip on the handle from when I dropped it last Christmas, had disappeared from the kitchen. It's strange how someone can erase themselves from your life so completely, yet leave traces everywhere. Her perfume lingered in the hallway, faint but unmistakable. By the door I could still see the slight impression where her shoes usually sat. 7 years together and all I had left were ghosts. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting me from the trance I'd fallen into. A text from Fernie. "Hey man, we still on for the Henderson job? Got the supplies loaded, meet you there at 9? Reality crashed back. Bills to pay, work to do. I texted back, on my way. I couldn't afford to fall apart, not when the business was already hanging by a thread. I showered, dressed, and forced myself to eat something. My wedding ring caught the light as I reached for my keys. I slipped it off and left it on the counter, a small act of defiance against hope. The Henderson job was a simple bathroom remodel, but every nail I hammered felt like it was going through my own hand. Fernie kept shooting me worried glances. "You look like hell, brother," he finally said during lunch break. Jenny left. The words tasted like ash. Fernie cursed under his breath. "For good?" I nodded, focusing on unwrapping my sandwich to hide the tremor in my hands. "I'm sorry, man." He clapped my shoulder, his grip firm. "What can I do? Just help me finish this job." I took a bite, not tasting a thing. "We need the money." The day dragged on endlessly, each minute stretching into hours. By the time we finished, darkness had fallen, and my body ached from more than physical labor. Fernie offered to buy me a drink, but I couldn't face questions or pity. I just wanted to be alone. Back at the apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with takeout I couldn't stomach, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the sound used to annoy Jenny. Now its steady drone was the only thing keeping me company. A knock at the door startled me. Mr. Gaines, our landlord, stood there with that uncomfortable look people get when they're about to talk about money. "Miller," he said, shifting his weight. "Rent's 5 days late. Again." The shame burned hot in my chest. "I know. I'll have it by Friday, I promise." His eyes softened with pity, and somehow that was worse than if he'd yelled. "Your wife stopped by earlier to drop off her key. Said I should talk to you about the lease." I nodded, unable to speak around the knot in my throat. "Friday," he repeated, and left me standing in the doorway. Back inside, I pulled out my phone without thinking, opening Jenny's Instagram account. My thumb froze over the screen. There she was, posted just hours ago, smiling at some upscale restaurant, her hair freshly done, wearing a dress I'd never seen. Beside her, a man in a gray suit had his arm draped casually across her shoulders. I recognized him immediately. Robert Thorne, the real estate developer who'd come into the salon where she worked. The same guy she'd mentioned with increasing frequency over the last few months. The caption read, "New beginnings." Just 2 words that confirmed everything I'd suspected but didn't want to believe. She hadn't just left me. She'd been planning her escape with someone else. Someone with money, connections, and everything I couldn't give her. I stared at the image until my eyes burned, watching anger twist with grief inside me like snakes fighting in my gut. 7 years of marriage, and I'd been replaced before she even walked out the door. With a steady finger, I deleted the app from my phone. If money's all you respect, I whispered to the empty room, one day I'll give you more than you can count. 3 days after Jenny left, I drove to the rundown garage where Fernie fixed broken tools on weekends. The place smelled like motor oil and desperation, fitting for what I was about to propose. I found him hunched over a table saw with a blown motor, his hands black with grease. He glanced up when my shadow fell across his workbench. "You still look like hell," he said, but his eyes showed concern. "Thanks." I leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how little I'd slept. My body felt hollow, like something vital had been scooped out. "I need to talk to you." He wiped his hands on a rag that might have been white once. "About?" "Starting over." The words came out stronger than I felt. "I'm done working for other contractors who can't pay on time. We should start our own company." Fernie's eyebrows shot up. "Now? Man, you just lost your wife. Maybe take a minute to..." "To what? Fall apart?" I crossed the room and spread out the folder I'd brought. "I've been thinking about this for months. We specialize in water and fire damage restoration. Insurance companies always pay, and there's steady work after storms." He looked skeptical. "We don't have the equipment. We borrow what we need until we can buy our own. Start small, build up." I pushed forward a business plan I'd stayed up all night creating. "We can run it from my truck until we can afford a real office." Fernie studied the papers, frowning. "This is crazy, Luke." "Maybe," I admitted, "but I can't stay where I am. I'll drown." He must have seen something in my face. Desperation, determination, maybe both, because his expression softened. "What would we call it?" he asked after a long pause. "Ace Restore." I'd chosen the name at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling. "Because we'll be the best at putting broken things back together." A tired laugh escaped him. "That's rich, coming from you right now." I didn't smile. "I'm serious, Fernie." He sighed, looking from me to the papers. "Your timing is terrible. So is my luck. Are you in? Remember when I taught you to shoot pool? That small dive bar where we'd go after construction jobs? The chalk dust would cling to our fingers as we lined up shots, the crack of the balls echoing over whatever country song was playing. That's what Fernie's face reminded me of now, calculating angles, weighing risks. "Yeah," he finally said. "I'm in." We registered the business the next day. Our equipment consisted of my old truck, Fernie's tools, and a few items we borrowed from former co-workers who owed us favors. Our first job came from a woman whose kitchen had flooded from a burst pipe. The contractor who'd started the job abandoned it when she couldn't pay his full rate up front. The first weeks nearly killed us. 12-hour shifts became the norm. We'd work until midnight, sleep a few hours, then start again before dawn. We skipped meals to save money and took any job that came our way. My hands blistered, cracked, and calloused over again. The phone rarely rang, and when it did, clients haggled over every dollar. "We should rename this place Barely Restore," Fernie joked one evening as we counted the day's earnings, barely enough to cover gas for tomorrow. "Not funny," I muttered, but smiled anyway. It was the first time I'd smiled in weeks. One night after a particularly grueling job, I found myself driving past Jenny's new neighborhood, a row of pristine townhomes with manicured lawns. I slowed down, hating myself for it, when I spotted his car in the driveway, a sleek BMW that probably cost more than I made in a year. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. "Never again," I whispered. I wouldn't come back here, not until I was so successful she wouldn't recognize the man she'd left behind. Back at my apartment, a notice waited on my door. Final warning for rent. I crumpled it in my fist. When I called Fernie to tell him, his solution was simple. "Move into the truck," he said. "Just until we get ahead. Save what you can." That's insane. So is paying rent when you could be investing in the business. He was right, and we both knew it. That night, we parked the truck behind his garage and arranged our sleeping bags in the cab. Rain started around midnight, pattering against the windshield. Fernie was already snoring softly beside me. surrounded by scattered tools and empty coffee cups. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythm of the drops. This wasn't rock bottom, I decided. This was just the foundation. A month passed in a blur of early mornings and late nights. Fernie and I worked every job we could find, sleeping in the truck most nights to save on rent. I'd been avoiding my apartment, stopping by only to collect mail and shower when I could. That's when I found it, a certified envelope from the county courthouse, my name printed in cold official letters. I knew what it was before I opened it. The divorce papers felt heavier than they should have, like they were made of lead instead of paper. Jenny had filed on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Simple. Clean. Final. I sat on the steps of my apartment building and read through every word, even though each one cut like glass. She'd already signed her name in neat flowing script, the same handwriting that used to leave me love notes on the bathroom mirror. I called Fernie to tell him I'd need the afternoon off in 2 weeks. Court date? He asked, already knowing. Yeah. Want me to come? No, I said quickly. This is something I need to do alone. The courthouse was a granite building downtown that I'd driven past 100 times but never entered. Inside, the air felt too cold and smelled of floor polish and desperation. I arrived early and sat on a hard wooden bench outside the courtroom, watching other people's lives fall apart while waiting for my turn. When Jenny walked in, my chest tightened. She wore a navy blue dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in loose waves. She looked like she belonged in this place with its marble floors and high ceilings. I glanced down at my cleanest work shirt and felt suddenly aware of the calluses on my hands. She nodded slightly in my direction but took a seat across the hall. 15 minutes later, we sat side by side before County Judge Raymond Holt, a balding man with glasses perched low on his nose who looked like he'd heard too many sad stories to be affected by ours. He flipped through our file with the bored efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Miller versus Miller, he announced, glancing between us. I see no children, minimal shared assets, and... He paused, peering over his glasses. Mrs. Miller notes emotional involvement with another party prior to separation. I kept my face expressionless, though my jaw ached from clenching. However, the judge continued, given California's no-fault divorce laws and the short duration of asset accumulation, the court orders a standard 50-50 division. He outlined the terms clinically. Jenny would keep the car, our meager household items, and her personal accounts. I'd retain my business license, tools, and the truck, along with most of the debt. The whole thing took less than 20 minutes. Do both parties understand and accept these terms? Judge Holt asked, already reaching for his gavel. Yes, Your Honor, Jenny said softly. I nodded. Yes. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the room. Divorce granted. Next case. Just like that, 7 years ended. We rose simultaneously, avoiding eye contact as we gathered our papers. In the hallway, I quickened my pace, wanting nothing more than to escape the building and the memory of what had just happened. Luke. I stopped but didn't turn around. Jenny's heels clicked on the marble floor as she approached. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry it ended this way. When I faced her, her expression was a mixture of pity and something else. Maybe relief. The diamond on her left hand was gone, but an indentation remained where it had been. You'll thank me one day, she said, her voice gentle but certain. You're not built for this life. I looked her in the eyes, seeing the woman I'd once built dreams around, now a stranger. You're right, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm built for better. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe regret, but I didn't stay to analyze it. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, the judge's gavel still echoing in my memory. I drove straight to our current job site, a flooded basement where Fernie was wrestling with a broken water main. Without a word, I grabbed my tools and waded in beside him, working until my muscles screamed and sweat soaked through my shirt. It's done? Fernie asked hours later as we packed up. It's done. That evening, we sat in folding chairs under dim work lights, eating canned soup heated on a camping stove. We were too tired to talk much. The only sounds the occasional scrape of spoons against metal and the distant hum of traffic. What now? Fernie finally asked. I stared into my empty soup can, turning it slowly in my hands. Now we work. Now we build. He nodded, understanding everything I wasn't saying. The divorce papers sat folded in my back pocket, a weight I'd carry until they became just paper again. But behind the exhaustion, something else flickered to life inside me, a resolve burning faintly but steadily. 6 months had passed since the day I walked out of that courthouse. 6 months of 14-hour days, of hands that never quite healed before the next job, of falling asleep too exhausted to dream. And something was changing. I stood ankle-deep in mud outside a flooded ranch house in East Bakersfield, barking orders at 2 new guys we'd hired last week. The December storm had overwhelmed drainage systems across 3 counties, and Ace Restore's phone hadn't stopped ringing since. "Torres, make sure that pump line runs all the way to the street, not the neighbor's yard," I called out. "And Matthews, I need that dehumidifier inside before you break for lunch." Fernie appeared beside me, clipboard in hand, grinning like he'd won something. "What?" I asked, wiping sweat despite the cool air. "Nothing," he said, checking off items on his list. "Just thinking about how 6 months ago it was just us with a rusty truck and borrowed equipment. Now look at us, 4 employees and more jobs than we can handle." I nodded, watching our small crew work efficiently. "Still not enough. We need to hire at least 2 more guys by February." Fernie laughed. "Man, do you ever slow down? When was the last time you slept more than 5 hours?" "I'll sleep when we're booked 3 months out instead of 3 days," I replied. But there was no bitterness in it anymore. Just determination. That was how the months unfolded, like water finding its path downhill. Natural, inevitable. January brought 3 more hires. February, we landed our first insurance company contract. By March, clients were coming to us through word of mouth, praising our work to neighbors and friends. The local community paper ran a small feature about businesses helping rebuild after the floods, with a photo of our team and the bold words, "Ace Restore leads local recovery efforts." I taped that article to the wall of the small warehouse we'd leased in April. Nothing fancy, just concrete floors, metal shelving, and enough space to store our growing inventory of equipment. But it was ours. Every morning I'd unlock those doors and feel something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. When May rolled around, I finally moved out of the extended stay motel I'd been calling home. My new place was nothing special, a 1-bedroom apartment with basic furniture and white walls I was too busy to paint. But I signed that lease with steady hands, remembering how it felt when Jenny had walked out our front door. Remember those nostalgia flashes from your childhood, when you'd stand at the edge of something tall, a diving board maybe, and your stomach would drop before you even moved? That's how I felt signing that lease. Terrified but ready. June arrived with the kind of heat that makes asphalt sticky. I was driving back from a job site when I saw it. Our first billboard. Water damage. Fire cleanup. Call Ace Restore. Simple black text on white background, lit up against the darkening sky. I pulled over just to look at it. Our phone number 40 feet tall above the highway. "It's only the beginning," I whispered to no one. The next day, Fernie called me to the warehouse for an emergency. When I pulled up, he was standing next to a new truck. Not brand new, but newer than anything we'd ever owned. Navy blue with Ace Restore professionally painted on the doors. "Company's first major asset purchase," he said, tossing me the keys. Figured the boss should drive it. I caught them reflexively, staring at the vehicle. "We can't afford this." "Actually, we can. Checked the books myself. We're turning profit now, Luke." I ran my hand along the smooth paint job, feeling something crack open in my chest. And then, for what felt like the first time in forever, I smiled. Really smiled. That night I stood in my empty apartment staring out the window at the city lights. My phone buzzed. "Fernie. Just wanted to say thanks," I told him when I answered. "For what?" "For believing in this when nobody else did. For sticking with me." There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his voice was gruff with emotion. "We're building something good here, man. Something that lasts." "Yeah," I said. "We are." After we hung up, I turned off the light and headed to bed. Somewhere in the digital ether, a notification appeared on an old email account I rarely checked anymore. From Jenny Miller. Subject, "Can we talk?" But I didn't see it. By morning, It would be buried under promotional emails and forgotten entirely. I was too busy looking forward to look back. 2 years later, I sat behind a polished mahogany desk that cost more than my first month's rent back when Jenny and I were married. The wall behind me displayed our company logo in brushed metal, Ace Restore, illuminated by recessed lighting. Life had changed so fast I sometimes felt like I was living someone else's success story. Fernie paced in front of me, unable to contain his excitement as he waved a folder of documents. His work boots left faint dirt marks on the carpet, something my new executive assistant would quietly handle later. "Luke, this wildfire contract is everything we've been working toward," Fernie said, stopping to plant both hands on my desk. "The state's bringing us in as primary restoration contractors for all the homes in the Santa Rosa burn zone. This triples our revenue overnight." I nodded, allowing myself a small smile as I reviewed the paperwork. 3 years of building relationships with those insurance adjusters finally paid off. "Paid off?" Fernie laughed, shaking his head. "This puts us in a whole new league. We'll need to hire at least 30 more people by next month." 40, I corrected, initialing the bottom of each page. "And we'll need a satellite office closer to the burn zone." Fernie stared at me, then broke into a wide grin. "There you go again, always 3 steps ahead." I was about to respond when a knock interrupted us. Marilyn, my assistant, stood in the doorway with a small stack of mail in her hands. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but these need signatures before close of business." She hesitated. "And there's a personal letter that came for you." She placed the pile on my desk, and I immediately noticed an envelope with handwriting I'd recognize anywhere. Jenny's looping script hadn't changed. "Thanks, Marilyn," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'll handle these." After she left, Fernie raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said, sliding the letter under a stack of contracts. "Let's finalize these specs for the new equipment." We spent another hour planning logistics before Fernie left to meet with our operations team. Only then did I pull out the envelope, turning it over in my hands. The return address was unfamiliar, not the upscale neighborhood she'd moved to with her boyfriend. I sliced it open with a letter opener and unfolded the single sheet inside. "Dear Luke, it's been a long time. I hope this letter finds you well. I've been following your company's success in the business journals. It seems you've built everything you always talked about. I'm truly happy for you. I've thought a lot about how things ended between us. I made mistakes I regret every day. Leaving when things were difficult was the worst decision of my life. I thought I wanted security, but I've learned that nothing feels secure without." I stopped reading, crumpled the paper into a tight ball, and tossed it into the trash bin. Whatever she wanted to say, I had no interest in hearing it. That door had closed years ago. That evening, I stood on the balcony of my downtown apartment, 15 floors above the city. The lights stretched out below me like fallen stars, cars moving in lazy rivers along the highways. I sipped bourbon from a crystal glass, feeling the burn slide down my throat. The skyline had become my confidant these past months. I'd traded up from my 1-bedroom to this penthouse 6 months ago, but sometimes I wondered if all this, the view, the space, the trappings of success, meant anything without peace. My phone buzzed. Fernie again. "Hey," I answered. "The team's heading to Marley's to celebrate the contract," he said, background noise indicating he was already there. "You should join us. Your name's going to be on the front page of the business section tomorrow." I swirled the bourbon, watching it catch the light. "Thanks, but I need some quiet tonight. Rain check?" After hanging up, I moved back inside and opened my laptop. Force of habit made me scroll through local news. A society page photo caught my eye. A charity gala at the Westlake Country Club. There she was, Jenny, in a blue evening gown, standing beside the same gray-suited man I'd seen in that first photo years ago. The caption read, "Jenny Miller and Robert Thorne, business partners and close friends at the Children's Hospital benefit." "Figures," I muttered, closing the laptop. I grabbed my keys and headed back to the office. The building was quiet at this hour, security nodding as I entered. I made my way to our floor, unlocked the glass doors, and stood in the darkened reception area, staring at our illuminated company logo. Jenny was still chasing comfort, still alongside the man who could provide it. Meanwhile, I'd found something I never expected. Purpose. The money, the success. They weren't the goal anymore. They were just proof that I'd been right to believe in myself when no one else did. I locked up again and headed home, leaving the crumpled letter where it belonged, in the past. The California sun spilled through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting golden streaks across the polished concrete floors of my Santa Barbara home. 5 years after Jenny walked out, I lived in a place I'd built with my own company, a modern 3-story mansion nestled on 2 acres overlooking the Pacific. I poured myself coffee from the kitchen island, while Fernie sat at the dining table, hunched over his laptop with reading glasses perched on his nose. The years had added a few gray strands to his dark hair, but his loyalty remained unchanged. "Payroll's looking good this month," he said without looking up. "Revenue's up 18% from last quarter. Not bad for 2 guys who started with borrowed tools," I replied, taking a sip from my mug. "Not bad?" Fernie laughed. "Luke, we've got over 70 employees and contracts in 3 states. I'd say we did all right." I nodded and stepped through the sliding glass door onto the wraparound terrace. The morning air carried the scent of salt and eucalyptus as I surveyed my kingdom. Spanish tile roof, infinity pool glittering in the sunlight, and manicured gardens that rolled toward the 12-foot gate at the property's entrance. Walking the perimeter had become my morning ritual. I inspected every detail with the same attention I once gave to patching leaky roofs, checking irrigation lines, examining stonework, adjusting outdoor lighting. Some habits die hard, even when you're not desperate anymore. I paused at the edge of the bluff, gazing out at the ocean. Sometimes I could hardly believe this was my life now, that I'd climbed so far from those early days. The memory of sleeping in my old truck with Fernie, tools rattling with every pothole, still felt fresh. Back then, I'd stare at the ceiling of that truck cab, stomach growling, and promise myself I'd never again be one paycheck from homelessness. Now I stood on property worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. When I returned inside, Fernie had abandoned his laptop and was raiding my refrigerator. "You really need to get out more," he said, assembling a sandwich. "All this," he gestured around the expansive house, "means nothing if you don't share it with someone." I shrugged. "I'm married to Ace Restore. That's sad, man." He pointed the knife at me. "Even I've got Maria and the kids. When's the last time you went on a date?" "I don't have time." "Bullshit." Fernie bit into his sandwich. "You've got nothing but time now. That's what managers are for." I changed the subject, discussing our next commercial project until Fernie left for a meeting with subcontractors. Alone again, I retreated to my home office, answering emails and reviewing designs until the sun began its descent. That evening, I stood on my bedroom balcony with a glass of bourbon, watching the sky turn deep orange over the water. The coastal breeze ruffled my hair as city lights began winking on along the shoreline. My phone vibrated in my pocket, an unknown number. I glanced at the screen, expecting a vendor or potential client. Instead, 6 words made my heart slam against my ribs. "Luke, it's Jenny. Please don't hang up." I stared at the message, bourbon forgotten in my hand. 5 years of silence, and now this. I deleted it without responding, assuming she'd made a mistake or was drunk texting the wrong person. I tried focusing on quarterly projections, but concentration eluded me. Hours later, as I prepared for bed, another text arrived from the same number. "I miss us." My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to type, "Who is this?" and pretend I didn't recognize her. Another part wanted to say, "There is no us." Instead, I deleted this message too and turned off my phone. Sleep didn't come easily. I tossed in my king-sized bed, memories surfacing like bubbles in dark water. Jenny's laugh, her perfume, the sound of her suitcase wheels on our apartment floor the night she left. Morning brought no clarity. I moved through my routine distracted, missing what Fernie said twice during our strategy meeting. "Earth to Luke," he finally said, waving a hand before my face. "Where are you today, man?" "Just thinking about the Henderson project," I lied. Fernie's expression told me he wasn't buying it, but he didn't push. That was his gift, knowing when to press and when to let things breathe. Later, I stood in my office overlooking the front drive, watching shadows lengthen across the lawn. My eyes settled on the gate at the property's entrance, solid iron with our company logo worked into the design. It represented everything I'd built: security, success, separation from the past. An odd chill ran through me despite the warm afternoon, like the warning tremor before an earthquake. A storm about to return after years of clear skies. The following evening, I sat in my living room, bourbon in one hand and a tablet in the other, reviewing drawings for our newest commercial project. The space around me was quiet except for the soft classical music drifting from hidden speakers, a luxury I still wasn't used to. 5 years ago, background noise meant arguments about money and the drone of our ancient window AC unit. The buzzer from the front gate cut through Beethoven like a wrong note. I frowned, setting the tablet aside. It was after 8, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Fernie had his own access code, and deliveries never came this late. I crossed to the security panel on the wall and tapped the screen. The camera feed blinked to life and my stomach dropped. Jenny stood at my gate, illuminated by the exterior lights. She wore a white dress that probably cost more than my first month's rent on this place. Her blonde hair swept over one shoulder. Older, yes, but still the same polished look I remembered. Perfect makeup, manicured nails, that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. But something was different now. Her shoulders were hunched slightly, and even through the grainy feed I could see nervousness in how she shifted her weight from one foot to another. She pressed the call button again, and this time I answered. "Hey, Luke," she said, her voice trembling through the speaker. "Can we talk? 5 years of distance, of building walls between then and now, and she shows up asking to talk like we'd had some minor disagreement yesterday." My throat tightened. About what? I managed to keep my voice steady. I made mistakes. She brushed hair from her face, looking directly into the camera. "Everything fell apart, Luke. The life I thought I wanted. It wasn't real. None of it was." She paused, drawing a shaky breath. "I understand now what I threw away." I said nothing, just watched her on the screen. The same woman who had laughed when I begged her to stay, who had walked out our door without looking back, who had chosen comfort over loyalty. She was now the one standing outside, asking to be let in. "I don't want your money," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. I need you to know how sorry I am. I need your forgiveness." The security panel in my hand suddenly felt heavy. "Please, Luke." "Just 5 minutes." Behind me I heard the soft click of the back door. Fernie stepped into the living room, wiping his hands on a shop rag. He froze mid-step when he saw the screen, his eyes widening as he recognized Jenny. "Is that—" I nodded once, not looking away from the monitor. Fernie moved closer, watching in disbelief as Jenny reached toward the camera. "Luke, please." Her voice had taken on a desperate edge now. "Everyone makes mistakes. What we had, it meant something. You know it did. What we had," I finally spoke, "was a marriage. Not a business arrangement you could opt out of when profits were down. I know, Love isn't something you trade for comfort, Jenny." My voice was calm but firm. "It's not a stock you sell when the market drops." Fernie stood silent beside me, his presence a reminder of who had actually stayed when things were hard. Jenny's eyes welled with tears, mascara beginning to smudge. "I have nowhere else to go," she whispered, the admission seeming to physically pain her. "He left me with nothing. The house, the cars. Everything was in his name." The irony wasn't lost on me. How many nights had I gone hungry after she left? How many mornings had I woken up cold in that truck, wondering if I'd ever have a real bed again? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past 5 years. Every callous earned, every sleepless night, every small victory that built this life she now wanted access to. "You left when I was nothing," I said, each word deliberate and clear. "You don't get to come back now that I'm everything." Jenny sobbed openly now, reaching toward the camera like she could somehow touch me through it. "Luke, please." My finger hovered over the gate control, the soft hum of motors ready to begin their work, ready to close the final door on a chapter I thought I'd already finished. I stared at Jenny's tearful face on the monitor. Her makeup had smudged around her eyes, the perfect image she'd always maintained now crumbling in real time. For a moment I felt a phantom ache where love used to live. Not for her, but for the man I'd been. The one who would have rushed to open that gate without question. "Luke," she whispered, "please don't do this." Beside me, Fernie shifted his weight but stayed silent, a steady presence at my shoulder. I pressed the button, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. "Goodbye, Jenny." The gate began its slow, mechanical slide. The sound of metal against metal filled the silence between us as the barrier between my past and present grew smaller. Jenny stepped closer to the camera, her white dress catching the security lights. "We can start over." Her voice rose with desperation. "I know you still care. You wouldn't be this angry if you didn't." But her pleas faded beneath the hum of the closing gate. The last thing I saw before the gap sealed completely was her hand reaching out, fingertips stretched towards something she'd thrown away years ago. Fernie and I stood there in silence for a long moment after the monitor went dark. I felt lighter somehow, like I'd set down a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. "You good?" Fernie finally asked, his voice quiet. I nodded, exhaling slowly. "Yeah, better than good." And for the first time in years, I meant it. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of my home, painting warm gold across the marble floors. I walked through the quiet halls, coffee in hand, listening to the peaceful silence. No ghosts, no regrets, just space to breathe. Fernie arrived around 9, portfolio tucked under his arm. He found me in the kitchen, staring out at the view of the coastline. "Morning," he said, spreading blueprints across the island counter. "Got the plans for the West Side project." I turned from the window and looked down at the future taking shape on paper. New buildings, new opportunities, work that would keep us moving forward. I smiled faintly, running my finger along the outline of what would become an apartment complex for families displaced by last year's fires. "It's time to move forward," I said, more to myself than to Fernie. He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. "Always has been, man. Always has been." The days passed peacefully after that. I threw myself into work, finding satisfaction in the rhythm of creation. Occasionally, I'd check the gate cameras, half expecting to see her white dress against the drive, but Jenny never returned. Whatever desperation had brought her to my door had either passed or found another target. A week later, I was buried in paperwork when Fernie walked into my office balancing 2 steaming mugs of coffee. He set one down beside me with a small grin. "You know what I was thinking?" he asked, dropping into the chair across from my desk. "Dangerous territory," I replied, reaching for the coffee. "That sound the gate makes when it closes." He mimicked the mechanical hum with surprising accuracy. "You should make that your ringtone." I stared at him for a beat before a laugh escaped me, real and unexpected. Fernie joined in, and suddenly we were both laughing harder than we had in years. It wasn't even that funny, but something about it broke through whatever tension had lingered in the air since Jenny's appearance. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," I said when I could breathe again. Fernie shrugged. "Just saying. It's a pretty satisfying sound." He wasn't wrong. Later that evening, I stood by my office window, watching as the setting sun turned my gate into burnished gold. Its surface caught the light, glinting like a promise kept. You know, forgiveness isn't what people think it is. It's not reopening the door to let someone back inside. It's locking it without hate, without letting bitterness poison what you've built on your side. I touched the glass, feeling its cool surface against my fingertips. The gate stood closed, not as a barrier, but as a boundary, a line drawn between the man I was and the man I'd become. Forever closed to the past, but open to everything ahead. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.